Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. A recession is coming. Well, when is the recession coming? What does that mean to you and your investments? And what exactly is a recession? And what are the signs that help predict one? Then we're going to discuss some actionable strategies to help protect you today on Get Rich Education. MC Lobsher is the host of the Cashflow Ninja podcast and president of Producers Wealth. He is on a mission to help you achieve financial independence and freedom as soon as possible. He achieves this by integrating the infinite banking concept with real estate investments to increase your returns and recapture cash flow that you are not even aware of that you're losing. MC shares the number one strategy of investors in his holistic wealth creation course at yourownbankingsystem.com. Finally, Total Control Financial gives you checkbook control of your 401k and IRA money to invest in real estate. It's time to get your retirement money into your own checking account, but you've got to avoid the little-known tax that you'll pay with any self-directed IRA. Instead, it's time for the QRP. Learn more and get your free copy of the QRP book by text messaging QRP in all capital letters to 72,000. Get Rich Education is brought to you by Ridge Lending Group, Producers Wealth, Norada Real Estate, and Total Control Financial.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Chittagong, Bangladesh to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education, and a recession is coming, a United States recession. So let's talk about this. What exactly is a recession? When is it coming? And what does that mean to you and your investments? To put it quite simply, a recession is when the economy declines significantly for at least 6 months. That means there's a drop in 5 economic indicators. Real GDP, and the gross domestic product is the amount of stuff that we produce in a year. Income, employment, manufacturing, and retail sales. People often say a recession is when the GDP growth rate is negative for 2 consecutive quarters or more, but of course a recession can quietly begin before the quarterly gross domestic product reports are out. So that's why the National Bureau of Economic Research, they measure the other 4 factors, because it's data that comes out monthly. When these economic indicators decline, again, income, employment, manufacturing, and sales, then so will GDP. Now, I contend that a recession, although it's unpleasant, is actually a normal part of the business cycle. Think about this. Right now, here today, you are currently living within the second longest period of expansion in modern U.S. history. The last recession, that ended in June 2009. Now, by July of 2019, assuming that things remain steady, then you will be living inside the longest period of expansion that the U.S. has ever seen, at least so long as it has been tracked, which is since the 1850s. Yes, the 1850s. So we're talking about the fact that you are now on the brink of experiencing America's longest economic expansion since before the Civil War. So yes, I'm talking about since before Abraham Lincoln even began his presidency. I'm talking about when Pennsylvania and Virginia used different currencies and basically were at war with each other. Now, during a recession, banks often cut interest rates to encourage borrowing and investing, and that's in an attempt to stimulate the economy. And of course, right now, what we're doing is the opposite. We're hiking interest rates higher. Well, then, what do economists say about the timing of our next recession? That's what everyone really wants to know. It's the timing. We always know a recession's coming. The next recession is coming by 2021. That's according to an overwhelming majority of economists, yes, 2/3 of business economists in the U.S., expect a recession to begin by the end of the year 2020. That's not very far away. Now, most of these respondents, they say that trade policy is the greatest risk to the expansion, and that's all according to a new survey that Bloomberg reported. So, yes, they say that trade policy like tariffs and not higher interest rates will be the number one thing that tilts us into recession. Now, note that these timing predictions, they all go beyond July of 2019, which means that you would then be living in the longest economic expansion in documented American history. But of course, no one knows this stuff for sure. These economists are only guessing, really just like you and I are. I mean, come on, really, even those regarded as the best market analysts have called for pullbacks in the market unsuccessfully in pretty much every year since the Great Recession ended back in 2009. They call for it every single year. But the economic cycle doesn't lie. Recessions are inevitable. So as an investor, how are you positioned for a downturn? Now, we're talking about the type of downturn that leads to losses in asset markets like it often but not always does. If you're a stock investor, to realize your stock gain at any time, recession or not, to realize a stock gain, you must sell. Other than dividends, which are paltry anymore, the only way to realize your stock capital gain is by selling that stock. Well, if the only way for you to realize a gain is to sell something for more than what you bought it for, well, now you have the pressure of getting the timing right. A lot of stock and mutual fund investors lost 50% during the Great Recession 10 years ago, a 50% haircut in the value of their portfolios. Well, for a cash flowing real estate investor like you, when you don't have to sell anything in order to make a gain, well, you're only going to have a paper loss when you sell. Now, if the value of your real estate goes down, you're still at some temporary disadvantages if that happens while you hold on to it, because you can't borrow against it, or you probably can't do a cash out refinance. Those things might not be feasible anymore. But now in real estate, you know how I like to talk about how you're often paid 5 ways. So let's take a look at what might happen to your total real estate ROI from an individual property if there was a recession and your property temporarily went down in value. So let's break it down with that simple example again of you putting a $20,000 down payment on a $100,000 income property. So you have an $80,000 bank loan there. We'll say your first profit center appreciation, that doesn't happen at all in the next recession. In fact, we'll even say the value of your property goes down. Now, we largely invest in what I call the stable markets in the U.S. Midwest and South. These are areas that didn't see much housing value pain during the last recession, which was a deeper recession than most. But let's just still say your property goes down in value. Let's use 4%. Let's say it declines in value 4% per year. All right. Now, with your 20% down payment, you're leveraged 5-to-1. So this 4% loss on your value is a 20% haircut off your equity. If you're a new listener and you don't follow that with the leverage, listen to some older shows. Yes, leverage cuts both ways. It amplifies gains, but it just magnified your loss in the same way. Your second profit center, cash flow, we'll say that it stays the same, although it often rises shortly after a recession sets in. We'll just say that you have $150 of residual monthly cash flow. That's $1,800 per year divided by your $20K of skin in the game. That's a 9% cash flow return to you, known as your cash on cash return portion. So now you've got minus 20% off the property value and plus 9% from the income. Your third profit center is tenant principal paydown. That does not change with the recession, we'll say. With your 6% mortgage interest rate loan, that's $898 per year of tenant-made principal paydown divided by your $20K of skin in the game. That's a 4% return there. We'll say your tax benefit, that's going to stay the same in a recession, about 5% here, although we're really approximating with your mortgage interest deduction and depreciation and more. And then finally, your inflation profiting benefit of 3%, we'll say that's unaffected by the recession. So we add up all 5 ways. You have minus 20% in this leveraged value loss, plus 9% is your cash on cash return, plus 4% on the principal pay down that the tenant makes for you, plus 5% on the tax benefits, and we still kept it at plus 3% on the inflation profiting. Well, that total, that all comes out to your plus 1% gain. A measly gain is what you have inside. This would have to be a pretty substantial recession with cash flowing real estate purchased in a stable market compared to what's often for the stock investor minus 25% or minus 50%. Now, notice that I only used a 9% cash on cash return in the example. Well, in 2009, when I experienced for the first time owning real estate that was worth less than what I bought it for, my cash flow went up. And I know that I've explained to you it before where in 2007, I bought my second fourplex building for $530,000. And 2 years later, in the height of the mortgage meltdown, the value plummeted to $480,000, which I've got to tell you felt awful initially. But because the economy had soured, people couldn't form enough capital to make a down payment on their own home, but they could afford the rent, and my rent income increased. So that begs the question, if you're a cash flowing real estate investor that's in this for the long term, as you should be, do you actually want there to be a recession? Yeah, do you want there to be a recession? That might be good for you. Well, now that I've defined a recession, I've talked about why many economists think it will happen, and I discussed what it means to you and your investments. Let's talk about those signs out there. Let's look at some economic signals that might foretell a recession. The first sign of an impending recession is one of those leading economic indicators is manufacturing jobs. Manufacturers receive large orders months in advance. That's measured by the durable goods order report. If durable goods orders decline over time, well, then so will factory jobs. And in turn, when manufacturers stop hiring, well, that means other sectors of the economy are going to slow down resultantly. So a fall off in consumer demand is normally the culprit behind slowing growth. And as sales drop off, well, businesses have to stop expanding. And soon afterward, they stop hiring new workers. And by this time, the recession is usually underway. And it's this durable goods order report that actually helped forecast the big 2008 recession. A recession is destructive. It creates widespread unemployment, and that's when it really affects the most people, when people are laid off. And then as the unemployment rate rises, consumer purchases fall off even more. And now we're in a bad cycle. Businesses go bankrupt. In many recessions, people lose their homes when they can't afford the mortgage payments. Young people can't get a good job after school, and that throws off their entire career. Now, a recession can become a depression if it lasts long enough. In a recession, like I mentioned, the economy contracts for 2 or more quarters, but a depression will last several years. In a recession, unemployment can rise to 10%, but in a depression, the unemployment rate will be upwards of 25%. Now, since the market bottomed out in March of 2009, we're talking the stock market here, investors have witnessed all 3 of the major stock indices at least quadruple in value at one point, at least quadruple. So it has been a nearly unique ride, and the chances that it's going to come to an end sooner rather than later are getting greater. Another sign that can hint that a recession is coming to you is when the unemployment rate struggles to push any lower. We might be at that point right now because the unemployment rate, it just can't get much lower than where it is now. Since it peaked at 10% 10 years ago, it's been on a pretty steady decline. The unemployment rate is now at 3.7%. That's a 39-year low. And of course, a low unemployment rate is usually a sign that the U.S. economy is in good shape, like what we're seeing now. But the issue is this: it's incredibly difficult to improve upon an employment rate when it's under 4% like this. People changing jobs makes it difficult to generate enough job growth to continually push the unemployment rate lower than 4%. And what's even greater is now you have a tiny, tiny pool of unemployed workers, and that makes it difficult for companies to fill skilled positions. And if employers can't fill positions, then their production capacity becomes constrained. Additionally, low unemployment, think about it. What this does is this creates an environment that puts the ball into the workers' courts, because if businesses are required to now offer higher wages to lure in new workers from other places and retain existing talent, well, that's what can create a spike in inflation. And I'm kind of waiting for that inflation spike to happen amidst this low unemployment. It still hasn't really happened yet. Now, the next sign of an impending recession is when the yield curve is flattening. This is happening right now. And I don't want to make it confusing. The yield curve, it's really just a depiction of the interest rates that are paid by various maturities of U.S. Treasury bonds. I know this sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook to you right there. This phenomenon happens when the gap between short-term interest rates and long-term interest rates shrink. And to make this as clear and concise as I can without confusing you, the reason that this matters is that banks borrow at short-term lending rates, and then they lend it to you at longer-term rates. And the greater the difference between the two, the more profitable it is for banks to lend money. But when this gap shrinks like it has, it becomes less enticing for banks to want to make any loans. Banks lose their arbitrage. Well, when banks have virtually no desire to lend money, that can lead to a halt in growth and a recession. So just to make this clear, let's put you in the position of the bank. Okay, you're the bank. If you can borrow money at 3% and lend it out at 7%, well, then you would do it all day, every day. But if you have to borrow at 7% and you can still only lend it at 7%, well, then you're not going to be very motivated to make loans. So the gap in yield between these two notes, that has been shrinking, and that could be a warning sign. And again, that's called the flattening yield curve. Well, this gap is now so tight between 2-year and 10-year U.S. Treasury notes that it has not been this close since 2007, and that's exactly when the U.S. economy was heading into what was arguably the worst recession in almost 80 years. Another sign, and what is this, about the fourth or fifth sign, that a recession can soon be upon you is that inflation picks up. And it has begun to pick up since the beginning of the year, but it's still pretty tame, less than 3%. The Fed targets 2%. The next sign that we might be nearing recession is house prices, but it's really not the best sign. Increasing home values, well, that just makes consumers more confident in all kinds of spending. And you get that feeling of confidence because you see the value of your real estate or your stock portfolio go up. Well, that's called the wealth effect. And currently, house prices are increasing around 6% year over year. And as such, the housing market is not a cause for concern currently. Mortgage underwriting standards are still pretty conservative. You see, house prices, they're really more of a lagging indicator of a recession, not a precursor to them. And in some cases, house prices don't even fall at all in a recession. Another recession sign is when credit card debt and late payments are on the rise. Credit cards are a bit of a push-pull for the U.S. economy because when credit cards are being used heavily, well, that suggests heightened purchasing activity from you. But that's a good thing since GDP is largely consumer-driven. But see, delinquencies, that can harm the U.S. economy during recessions. The credit reporting agency TransUnion, they reported that over the last 3 years, credit card accounts delinquent more than 90 days have jumped from 1.5% up to 1.9%. And really, the issue here is that as interest rates rise, well, now servicing this unsecured debt is going to become more difficult, and that can result in even higher delinquency rates. So as we witnessed during the housing crisis of 2008 and 2009, rising delinquency rates, that can create a bad domino effect for the companies that are behind these loans. And really the last sign or signal that a recession could soon be upon us is really what I mentioned earlier. It's just the great length, the duration of the economic expansion that just cannot go on forever. And both Main Street and Wall Street investors would be wise to pay attention to the current and the historic economic expansion cycles. We are currently in that second longest economic expansion of the past 161 years. The only longer expansion was leading up to the dot-com bubble, and we are only 8 months away now from eclipsing it. And this would suggest that you're more than likely closer to the end of our current expansion, just based on historical expansion length, than you are to the middle of it. So any one of these 5 or 6 recession signals that I mentioned, any one of them alone do not provide enough concrete evidence that a recession is near. They are just all pieces of a growing puzzle that implies that a recession is coming. Now, I think that cash flowing real estate in stable markets that have a diverse economy, that is a pretty good place to be during the next recession. And that's why I continue to be a buyer today. You know, another reason for that, and most people overlook this, is that by doing this, you can get a positive yield between now and whenever the recession occurs. Well, you wouldn't get a good yield if you liquidated and went to cash, and then you would be paying that opportunity cost all along, just waiting for the next recession. Because you know what happens when markets get into a bubble stage? You know what actually happens next once a bubble forms? No, it's not that the bubble goes pop. It's that the bubble grows into an even larger bubble. That's what typically happens next. Now, there's even another layer to this. I want to play something for you. It's something that is like adding an extra blanket of insulation against recession onto yourself. This comes from Get Rich Education TV. And let's just play about the first 2.5 minutes of the audio here from this video. Here's some more perspective for you, and then I'll come back and comment. If you want to hedge yourself for the next economic recession and still be profitable and get a yield between now and then, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, host of the Get Rich Education podcast and Forbes Real Estate Council member. Whether it happens sooner or later, we will have another economic downturn sometime. Well, what is the best way that you can both protect yourself now and have a good yield until that time? It's for you to buy cash flowing real estate near a medical district. Look, even during the last recession, the healthcare sector continued to expand with more employment, even when others were getting laid off. Nationally and elsewhere, as the population ages, there is outsized demand for medical jobs, and it's projected that this trend is going to continue. In fact, even futurists predict that healthcare will be one of the last sectors that robotics and artificial intelligence could possibly disrupt way down the road. In almost every case, medical stocks and mutual funds, though, they don't provide you with leveraged growth, and stocks and mutual funds don't provide you with a durable monthly income stream as well as cash flowing real estate does. And really some more good news for you is that as a real estate investor in most metros, it's easy to identify where the medical districts are because they're more geographically concentrated than more dispersed economic sectors like retail are. It's so hard to predict the future direction of things like markets and interest rates and the duration of economic cycles. So instead, just invest in something that's almost demographically recession-proof. Invest in something predictable, and I've been practicing this myself. I, in fact, have an apartment building close to a major medical district, and even in the last recession, it stayed nearly 100% occupied, and my rent amount actually increased during the recession. So what's your takeaway as a real estate investor? It's to buy income-producing property near medical districts, and you can both prosper now and be hedged against larger economic downturns later. Yeah, so there's another angle for you with the medical sector being especially recession resistant, almost recession proof. And you can watch those videos at Get Rich Education TV, and it really helps bring some of these points to life. It's a collection of videos that I do that you can check out at getricheducation.tv. Now, realize that before 2008, real estate prices had never crashed. Can you imagine that? On a national basis, real estate had never crashed before 2008. In fact, I know a lot of people, including some smart ones, back before that time that said real estate never goes down in value. It just never goes down. Well, in their lives, it hadn't until it had. Just think about it. In 2008, only 10 years ago, no one had even heard of the term quantitative easing. No one had heard of derivatives. No one had heard of bailouts or bail-ins. That was all 10 years ago. Just amazing. Well, this has been kind of depressing stuff to think about, but I've got some light to add, some positives amongst all this recession talk. That's next. You're listening to Get Rich Education.
Would you like to know the easiest way to create wealth and passive income with real estate? This is Marco Santarelli with Norada Real Estate Investments. Now you can access the best deals without the stress or hassle of having to find, renovate, or manage those properties. We save you time by providing you with passive income investment properties in some of the best U.S. markets. Learn more by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing. There's no obligation and nothing to buy. Simply visit passiverealestateguide.com and get your free copy today. That's passiverealestateguide.com.
For a real estate investor like you seeking an income property loan, go to Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. Over the years, you've heard President Chaley Ridge generously devote her time to you here on the show as a guest. Ridge provides investment property loans in most U.S. states, and you're going to find out how they've helped more people realize their dreams of real estate financial freedom than any other mortgage lender in the entire nation when you get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hi, this is Rich Dad Advisor Garrett Sutton. You're listening to the always valuable Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. Human ingenuity finds ways to overcome our problems, and I have a lot of faith in human ingenuity. Remember Thomas Malthus's 19th century theory about the agricultural carrying capacity of the Earth's population? He was basically saying that the Earth would soon run out of arable land, and massive amounts of the Earth's people would die of starvation. Well, that never happened. Human ingenuity and innovation and science became more efficient, and we fed more people than we ever thought we could. More recently, what about the Y2K bug? That was a whole bunch of nothing 18 years ago. And in the future, I have complete, and I mean complete, confidence that water shortages are going to be met with desalination or water transport technologies to meet our needs. In the future, I have faith that autonomous cars will nearly abolish all traffic-related deaths. So, in light of some larger challenges that we've overcome, I harbor a lot of optimism that we can weather our economic recessions every decade or so, and we can still potentially thrive when we do it with real estate. And, I just don't know if absolutely every problem is surmountable, though. I mean, the world still has a lot of poverty. And there's even one real estate problem that won't go away throughout the centuries, and that's that even sultans' palaces still have cockroaches inside them. So my point is that I have a lot of faith in human ingenuity and innovation when it comes to solving the world's major problems. And, people have been predicting the end of the world since the beginning of the world. People basically have two fears about a recession as it's tied to their investments. I think the first one is they're afraid the market will crash and that they will lose a ton of equity rather quickly. And the second fear is that they're afraid that the market will climb much higher and that they will miss the ride if they don't buy more. And many people are equally afraid of both of those things. Number one is losing out. Number two is missing out. So consider that in U.S. history, periods of prosperity, they are longer than periods of recession or depression. And do you know how long the average U.S. recession lasts? In fact, the average recession lasts just 18 months. So, your lifetime is just going to keep flying by, whether we're in an economic boom or bust. So your results have more to do with what you do. Do you ever look at your life and just wonder where all the years have gone? Well, the future, and this concept of the future, it's actually not some grand vision of what's going to happen somewhere out there on the horizon for you. No, the future, for all intents and purposes, is happening to you right now, today. These are the moments when you're going to make or break the plans that you've had for all these years. At some point earlier in your life, you have said to yourself, when I grow up, I'm going to do something great. Well, the fact is, today, you are grown up and your journey is already well underway. If there was something awesome, something groundbreaking, something substantial, something different that you want to do with your life, you better be doing it right now. If you're saying that the economy is just too hot, too cold, good, bad, up, down, sideways, volatile, or too fill in the blank to get into real estate right now, or if you're saying to yourself, well, I'm just too late to the party, all the good opportunities are long gone by now, well, you've got to really ask yourself, is that just a lie that you're telling yourself to validate inaction because it lets you off the hook? I think all of us do this a little bit. It keeps you from having to actually think about what it takes to turn your dreams into reality. And it might even be a subconscious defense mechanism of sorts. I really think that's what it is. After all, if we can find the reasons to not do something, however crazy those reasons might be, it will admittedly save us a lot of time, effort, heartbreak, and pain along the way. So, let's be honest, there is a price to be paid if you do want something substantial in this world. Obstacles and difficulty, they're pretty much a locked down guarantee. I mean, gosh, your worst return on time invested with real estate is at buy time or sell time when you have to jump over all these document hurdles that keep coming at you. So given the inherent leap of faith that you need to take up to and including the moment that you need to wire funds off for your next investment, right? Make sure the SWIFT code gets entered correctly. Well, then it shouldn't surprise any of us that a lot of people just can't seem to get started. And if you think you're too old, well, guess what? You are never going to be any younger than you are right now today. So assuming that you haven't already made the decision to give up on your life, here's an idea. Start looking past your self-imposed age restrictions or fears if that's all that's holding you back. And if you think the economy is to blame, just consider that more than half of all Fortune 500 companies were started in the midst of either a substantial recession or a bear market. So it doesn't matter where the economy is headed. You just need to figure out your solutions and how that's going to fit into your grand scheme of things. I've heard a lot of people use the economy as a scapegoat for their refusal to get started, or whoever's in Congress or whoever the president is. If you think you're too late to the party, for as long as I can remember, I've listened to the same exact people give me the same misguided objections to the exact things that I've already done and hopefully that you've already accomplished. It doesn't matter how the world changes. People are just going to always get hung up on the same old tired things. And it usually has very little to do with where we're at in world history and everything to do with the fact that it's incredibly easy and maybe even primordially human to sit on the sidelines and think maybe someday. And I still remember some of those fears. I still remember the exact spot where I was standing on my fourplex sidewalk in 2002, looking at the building I was about to buy, my first owned home or property of any kind, and being a bit scared as I think I was paying for the property inspection on that summer day and pretty much knew I was going to end up buying the place. And I didn't even know what the terms cash flow and equity meant then, yet I was buying this building. And we had just come off the recession of 2001 back then, speaking of recessions, and the tragedy of September 11th, 2001, and all of the uncertainty that that put into the world's future. That was still weighing heavily on my and everyone's mind at the time. But you know what? All that worldly stuff didn't matter. It's what I did that mattered. I bought the building, and that set me on the right course thereafter. And you know what? In good times and in bad times, people are not going to stop needing an affordable place to live. So it's about thinking differently. Every dollar you lock into a 401k is a dollar that cannot use other people's money. And then all that 401k money generated, that also comes from a W-2 job where you're just selling your time. So you can follow money and have it go into a 401k, or make money follow you and use it now. It's not about using a potential recession as a scapegoat. So truly, go and do beats wait and see. You know, some people think they'll save their money and hope to live better in life someday. And then one day they look back and then they try to realize why they didn't have as much happiness as others. If you don't take a chance, then you don't have a chance. Failure is actually not the thing that destroys most dreams. Fear and doubt, they destroy more dreams than failure ever does. And you've got to ask yourself, if you're not living your dreams, are you living your fears? The great news here is that the choice is all yours. Well, I think you've all heard the old Chinese proverb, something like, give a man a fish and you will feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. Well, a while back, I thought, why not do both? Give you a fish and teach you to fish. GetRichEducation.com is where you learn how to fish, where you'll find all of my articles, podcasts, and those videos on Get Rich Education TV. And then you're also given a fish because you can connect with some of the nation's best real estate providers and buy some cash flowing property. You're given the fish at GREturnkey.com. Well, whether a recession begins this week or not, either way, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I'll be back next week to help you build your wealth. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
As America's third largest city, Chicago, Illinois has big economies of scale for real estate investors. But there are problems with investing in highly taxed, fiscally strapped Illinois. You can beat it when you invest in Chicago land, staying on the Indiana side of the state line. Your property tax on a median Indiana home is less than half that of an Illinois property. Forbes ranks Indiana as one of the top 10 states to do business. With typical rents at $1,250 and purchase prices at $125K, Northwest Indiana numbers work. Learn more and connect with the turnkey provider at GetRichEducation.com/Chicago. That's GetRichEducation.com/Chicago.
71% of Americans aren't saving enough for retirement. It's going to get worse as people live longer, and you need to start thinking differently. But you can't lose your time. Real estate is the investment vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Keith Weinhold of Get Rich Education is host of one of America's top investing shows, Disrupting Wall Street. He's an international best-selling author, a writer for Rich Dad Advisors, and has been an active income property investor since 2002. He has created thousands in passive monthly income for countless followers, and now he has a free book, The 7 Principles for Creating Wealth in Your Life. Get your copy now at GetRichEducation.com/book. That's GetRichEducation.com/book. Because invest in what produces income for you now and later. Sign up now at GetRichEducation.com/book.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.